Hello and welcome in to the Odds and Audibles podcast. I'm your host, Jared Mack. It's been a while, and we're back here on the podcast. I'm joined by my great friend Erik Skopil here. We're here to discuss some new movements in the recruiting world for Oregon. They land the number one overall wide receiver, Dakorien Moore. Erik, this is pretty big news.
My 4th of July was consumed by this, basically, which is, hey, I guess worse things. But on Thursday evening, Dorian Moore shoots off some smoke bombs, green and yellow, announces his commitment on his Instagram Live. Biggest recruit / commit in program history, supplanting Kayvon Thibodeau for the number one spot. We'll run through the rest of the list later, but this is as big as it gets. And frankly, kind of surreal that Oregon would be able to get we'll get into the film breakdown and what we see on tape, because this is crazy how good this player is, but also just a player from basically the Dallas area down in Duncanville, Texas, who had all the regional schools, all the schools nationally wanted this kid. And if you had told me 10 years ago, I would have been shocked if Oregon was a hat on the table, but much less for them to receive the commitment. Pretty big deal just from a recruiting landscape perspective. And I feel like we keep hitting these kind of milestones along the way, but I mean, a top 5 player in the class from Texas committed to Oregon yesterday. And that's a pretty weird thing to say.
Yeah, that'll do it. That's it for the show. No, I'm kidding. I before we jump into how good of a player Moore is and what this means to Oregon, I do want to ask you what you thought of the incorporation of the fireworks on the July 4th for his recruitment, or his commitment video. I thought it was smart. I really haven't seen too many guys do holiday oriented commitment videos, but this one was pretty good. I liked it.
It was planned out, which I liked. I like it when there's a plan. It's not just I'm picking up and putting the hat on, which used to be creative before everybody now does it 25 years ago. It was fun. His IG live did cut out for 30 seconds, and I had no idea what was going on. And then suddenly he was outside, and they were shooting off fireworks, smoke bombs, whatever they were, and there was green and yellow, like the Pope or something, to announce the new Pope, and he was celebrating, and all his family was excited. And then somebody grabbed the phone and said something about how he wished he would have gone to LSU, and it was a thing. But it was cool. I was into it, and I like it when they have a little personality and you kind of get a glimpse of it, right? I think I've seen a couple times where it's on mom's birthday and they do the birthday cake thing and it's sliced with the schools on it or whatnot. I do
love those.
I do like that. I like when food's incorporated. I'd probably incorporate food if I was ever given an opportunity.
That could be a good July podcast ideas. How would we announce our commitments? But I don't think anybody really wants to hear that.
It is July, Jared, and we could maybe schedule. Scrap this Dakorien Moore thing, Jared. No, I liked it. Showed a little personality. I hadn't seen it yet. I hadn't seen that particular idea executed, and I thought it worked out well. And of course, if it was other colors, it probably wouldn't have gotten the same reviews from me. But green and yellow looked pretty good.
Green and yellow did look pretty good. All right, where do we want to jump in here? Because there's a lot of storylines. We were kind of talking about this before the show. There's a lot of storylines underlying for Oregon and where they are in the recruiting rankings and specific people recruiting rankings. But where do you want to jump in at?
Let's just talk about the player, because sure. I think that's probably a good spot. I mean, I think we've kind of hit this is the best recruit Oregon's literally ever landed. He supplanted Kayvon Thibodeau for that spot. This is the number one receiver in the country. But why is he ranked that way? I've got a film review up on the site. I know Jared is quite familiar with the Dorian Moore's film as well. He's 5'11", 190 pounds, very well built. I was watching a short on YouTube of him catching passes with weighted gloves that were intentionally non-stick gloves. His hands are great, I guess is the point I'm making. This is a compact receiver who can go up and get it. You had a comp, which we'll bring up in a moment, because I was racking my brain yesterday for what I saw exactly, but this is a 5-tool player at receiver. I know you're a baseball guy. You get that. We get what I'm saying, but he can kill you in the screen game. He's a great route runner. He's got 10.4 100-meter speed. He was 5th in the state of Texas's long jump final with a jump of almost 24 feet. So He can go high point the ball over smaller corners. He's really sudden after the catch. Like there's a couple of plays on the film, when you go watch it, go check out his huddle, by the way. It's like ridiculous. It's about as fun as you're going to have watching a huddle film. Like I said this before, but like sometimes for the film review, it's like, oh, it's a 10-minute film. Okay, I'll watch like the first 5.5 minutes. I get the picture. This is one where it's like, I got to watch the whole thing. And like the guys also, the last 2 minutes are like him just drilling guys as a blocker. Like this guy's a dog. He's a heck of a football player, but I mean, he's really diverse as a receiver. He plays outside at Duncanville. I think he could be awesome in the slot at Oregon. I'd be curious to see what they want to do with him. I think you'd probably want his speed on the outside, but he can be somebody who would be just an absolute mismatch problem for just about anybody on the field. So wherever you line him up, he's going to find a way to win, I think. And I just think the ceiling is really high here, and the floor is like incredibly high. Like he'll enroll for 2025, assuming he signs with Oregon in December. And there's going to be a couple of starting spots open. Like, I don't want to say I expect him to start, but he's definitely we're going to be talking like sometime probably right around now next year of like, maybe Dakorien Moore is one of their starting receivers. Like, I think that's a conversation we'll probably be having because this guy he's like ready to go right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. I watched this film this morning. Happy 4th of July or belated 4th of July for everybody. I was not by my computer yesterday, and that's just kind of how it goes on the 4th of July. But I watched this film this morning, and I'll go right into my comp. His tape specifically, his high school tape, reminded me a lot of Evan Stewart's high school tape, who was also a top recruit in the country. I have it right here. He was the number 1 overall wide receiver in the country by 24/7, and then number 2 in the composite. So again, very similar rankings to Moore. But his tape reminded me a lot of Stewart's, both kind of guys who are 5'11", 6 feet, 180, 190 pounds coming out of high school. But guys you're comfortable playing on the outside. Like normally it's like the Erik receiver is the Troy Franklin mold, that like 6'3" to 6'4" guy who could run fast, can high point the ball. Maybe not the best route runner, but someone who can just, run straight lines perfectly. And that's not necessarily what Moore is, because he does it all. Like you were talking about, Erik, on his film, like he can catch a screen pass, he can catch a slant and go the distance. He can do all of these things from the wide receiver position. But he reminds me a lot of Evan Stewart, at least from the high school perspective, because I'd put him out there at X. Like I think he's an elite athlete. I think he's an elite route runner. I think he has elite hands. Like he can go do all the things that, Troy Franklin did, and then 6'3" mold, and him at a 5'11", 6 foot mold. He's well put together. And when you watch like a 5-star receiver's tape, he's going to look a lot better than a lot of the cornerbacks on the field in high school. It's just how it goes. So I always try to look for what else he does. And like you said, like the last couple minutes of his tape was him, blocking for other guys and putting cornerbacks on their butts. Like that's what I want to see. I want to know if this guy is, is he a receiver that's just there to catch passes, or is he a receiver there to win? And that Duncanville program is really good, and they teach all their kids really well down there. And he's a guy who's out there that's trying to win. And I think he's just a monster. I wouldn't be surprised if he's kind of like Evan Stewart when he got to Texas A&M, and he's a guy who plays a lot his freshman year. I can't remember if Evan Stewart was a starter, but I want to say that he was off the top of my head in his freshman year at A&M, because there wasn't a whole lot of talent at receiver then. But in that 22 class that Stewart was in, he was really good. But I really like Moore. I mean, I know that's kind of saying the obvious because he's a 5-star receiver, but he's just at a different level than a lot of other guys. Like Jurion Dickey's high school tape was really good, and you're like, yeah, I see the vision here. Like maybe he gets some run his first year if he wasn't hurt, but this is just a different level of a player here. And like we entered the show with, like, the number 1 player in Texas, the number 1 wide receiver committing to Oregon, like that's just leaps and bounds of what you thought it could be under Dan Lanning. And now it's like officially here on the table, and he's getting these guys. So I think this is a huge, huge landing for Oregon. And I think he could be, like you said, Erik, I think he could be a day 1 guy, especially considering the holes that Oregon's wide receiver room is going to have after, presumably Stewart leaves and then Tez Johnson is out of eligibility.
two things that you said that I just had reactions to. Stewart had like 650 yards as a true freshman at A&M. So starter or not, he was like one of their top receivers right away. I like that comp, by the way. It could be a situation where Stewart kind of shows the blueprint for what Dakorien Moore will be.
That's what I was. Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I was gonna get to that later.
Okay,
like,
we'll save it. It's yours.
No. We can go right now. Like, I was thinking, like, again, Troy Franklin's gone. That's like your prototypical X receiver. But I expect Stewart to be the X receiver in Will Stein's offense. And I think if you want to know what Dakorien Moore might look like at Oregon as an X receiver, it's probably going to be this 2024 season with Evan Stewart there. It might not be as often of like a deep shot just down the sideline to Troy Franklin, but they'll get him running deep, usually like on post or something where he can use his footwork and his route running ability rather than like, hey, I'm 6 inches taller than the guy who's covering me. Like, just throw the ball up in the air and we'll get it. It'll be different, but it's still going to be really good.
And then the other thing I was going to say to reacting to your first thing there was, we see the 5-star moniker next to obviously like about 30 recruits per cycle.
Mm-hmm.
There are tiers. Like there's and that's kind of what you're saying on Jurion. I just wanted to kind of like drive home that point. Like there's the guys like Moore who I think are pretty surefire, can't miss. This guy's going to be probably a 1st or 2nd round draft pick. Like it would be a surprise if not. He's going to contribute right away. He's going to be a dude. And then there's a guy like Jurion who was, I think, like the 20th overall player in his class, like the 4th or 5th receiver. And I'm not trying to diminish Jurion at all because we love him as a player. I think he's going to have a chance to have a really good year in 24. But like there's a reason that Moore is the highest rated prospect Oregon has got a commitment from, and that he is, like 15 spots higher in his class than Jurion was in his or whatever. So I think that's a good way to look at it. And, because there are tiers of 4 stars, there are tiers of 3 stars, like just because they share the same, numeric value doesn't mean they're like identical prospects. Like not all 5 stars are created equal. And if you actually go and look at Oregon's, I just posted on the site, but like the best the best recruits Oregon landed, all the 5 stars, like the top guys are like Haloti Ngata, Kayvon Thibodeau, guys who were like can't miss prospects, were awesome immediately in college and went to the NFL and were drafted high. And obviously Ngata is a Hall of Famer. Kayvon Thibodeau had like 11 and a half sacks last year, I think. Like these guys are really good, surefire players. I think Moore is much more in that group than he is on like a Kingsley Sumatia or those sort of a prospect. So I just wanted to kind of point that part out because I think that's a good point in terms of differentiating between the 5 stars.
Yeah, there's always like it doesn't look like it when everybody's like listed as a 4 or 5 star, but there are gaps. And I think this is one of those where it is a gap between like him and the rest of the receivers, like even him and Dallas Wilson's tape. Like I think there's a big difference between those two, even though they're both very talented players. It's just Moore is, again, like I highly recommend those listening or watching, like go watch his huddle tape. 7 minutes long. It's very enjoyable. And for Oregon fans, like to imagine him, donning the green and yellow and going out there and catching passes from Dante Moore or Austin Novosad, or shoot, I don't know, maybe another transfer portal quarterback. Probably not, but it definitely gets your brain thinking. Like this is a real legit guy, and who could come in day one and make an impact immediately to Oregon's offense. Probably at the X receiver, at least that's where I would put him. But I'm not Will Stein, so we'll eventually, hopefully, long way to go, and hopefully he stays through with Oregon and he gets to sign, and we get to see him next year. But real legit guy, and somebody who's going to be an instant impact guy, like we keep talking about. But he's that good on the field, and again, playing against really high level competition in Dallas, like that's another thing. Like he's doing this against other 4 or 5 stars across the country in Dallas. So just a tremendous player and a huge get for Oregon here early in the cycle.
Let's talk about maybe the coaches who were involved here, because there's a couple of kind of interesting pieces. I posted the story Thursday evening, but Junior Adams, the receivers coach, moves not only to top in the Big Ten in the recruiter rankings, and for those unfamiliar, we do actually have rankings and grades basically for the coaches who recruit the prospects. They're either given primary or secondary I guess, credit for a kid who commits, and primary weighs you a little bit more than secondary. But Junior Adams is now the nation's #1 recruiter for the 2025 class. I believe this is a first at Oregon. I can't think of a time where somebody else would have been #1 even for a moment. If someone in the comments is like, oh yeah, don't you remember when such and such happened like 4 years ago? Like, let me know. Like, it's hard to remember all this stuff, but I don't remember ever writing that type of story. So a little Junior Adams kind of flowers for him, because this is pretty rarefied air to be like atop the national recruiter rankings. 4 players committed to him this class, with obviously Moore, with Dallas Wilson, who we mentioned a second ago, who we have at 24/7 Sports as a 4-star, but the composite has him, I believe, as a 5. Mm-hmm. Isaiah Mosey and Cooper Perry. That's 4 receivers, and we'll get to the end of like, do we think they're going to add more? But regardless, this 4, if they sign all 4 of these guys, is ridiculous. It's incredibly talented. I think they all fit together kind of in fun ways. They're not like, I mean, there's some carryover in talent, but they're kind of all different. You could see them being played together down the line, theoretically. Mm-hmm. So there's a little Junior Adams love. And then Rashad Samples, who listeners maybe know, because I know we talked about it when he was hired. His dad is Reginald Samples, the head coach at Duncanville, the school.
Great name.
Great name. Reginald Samples.
My goodness.
High school coach for Dakorien Moore. So like there was a little bit of like
certainly helps.
A little bit of help there. And Rashad, as you would guess, was given secondary credit, and he moved all the way up to number 13, I think, on the national recruiter rankings. So Oregon's staff is really good at recruiting. Just wanted to throw those guys out as names that kind of need to be mentioned for their work here. But you know, just to stick with Junior for a second here, he's recruited incredibly well. This is now 3 straight cycles with at least 1 5-star prospect. They had Jurion in 23, Gatlin Bear last year, who won't enroll until 26. But when you start thinking about what this is going to look like in a couple of years, it kind of gets your juices flowing here. Think about Gatlin on one side with his like 10-2 speed, with Dakorien Moore maybe on the other, and then whoever, excuse me, in the slot. It's like, oh my goodness, this could be scary.
Yeah, and you know, I think Junior, like, coming into Oregon was like, he was certainly known, but like his recruiting chops were maybe unknown. Like, he did well at Washington. He got a couple guys like Puka Nacua before he transferred to BYU, right? I'm getting that right.
You are getting that right. BYU. He did.
Okay. Yep. He got Puka Nacua. I think one of the trio of McMillan, Adunze, and Polk was a 4-star. I don't remember which one it was, or maybe all 3 of them were, but they weren't like
McMillan and Adunze were, because Polk came from Oklahoma State. I think he transferred. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
But they weren't like legit guys, like high 4 stars, like a 5-star kind of guy. So, and you knew him from his development of Cooper Kupp, like at Eastern Washington, and like how he developed the receivers. And you saw it last year with Washington's, or the last 2 seasons, frankly, under Washington, with Polk and Adunze and McMillan, like all of their development throughout. And now he's got this, the brand name of Oregon and the NIL money of Oregon. And, you know, some people are upset about that, but this is how college football is nowadays. So this is how it goes. And Oregon is doing quite well with it. And he's getting so many incredible players. And it's really impressive because, you know, Oregon, they're still looking for like their first round wide receiver in a long time. And some of us thought it might be Troy Franklin last year. He had a bad combine, didn't help, and he lands in the 4th round. But he's been really good at developing these guys the last couple of years at Oregon. Like, I think Troy Franklin really grew in the last 2 seasons of his career at Oregon under Junior Adams. You know, Tez Johnson was a bit of a question mark coming from Troy, just because it's like, how is he going to develop into the D1 Power 5 level? No problems. I think Gary Bryan and Trayshawn Holden, you saw down the end of the season last year, we're getting better. We'll see what Jurion Dickey can do, and Kyler Casper and these other guys like Ryan Pelham. But, you know, that Ryan Pelham and Jeremiah McClellan, like, those are 2 really good gets from Junior Adams in Oregon last season, signing day flips. He's just been an absolute animal coming here. And, you know, we'll see how long he stays at Oregon, because he's talked about it. He wants to be a head coach somewhere, or like an offensive coordinator. And he's going to get the chance. I really do believe so, because he's doing this at a high level of recruiting. He's developing at a high level in his receiving room. And, he's doing this with a program that has been incredible the last couple of seasons, but they're going against the big dogs. They're going against like the true, I'll put the word out, the blue bloods. And I'm sure Oregon fans will say that Oregon is a blue blood, but he's still beating LSU and Ohio State and Texas A&M, like programs that have been you know national champions in recent memory and the national champion in older memories. Like, these are really good recruiting wins, and I think Junior Adams is not going to stop here. And I think that specifically in this class, he'll probably stop with the 4 guys, because I don't know how many more receivers they need. And you always need more receivers, but 4 in a class is pretty darn good. But again, to get Wilson and Moore at the top of the list, 2 composite 5 stars at the very minimum, that'll do. I think that'll be okay for the next couple seasons.
And the other thing we should jump into maybe is, you mentioned it, going against the Blue Bloods here. Oregon's class moves to number 5 nationally. It was at 5 after Dorian Moore surprised all of us last Saturday. I mean, I was getting ready to go to the track meet, and Jared messages like, should we post something? This guy just committed. And we're going like, oh shit.
That was a good one.
That was a good day. I mean, that was again, recruiting last couple of weeks has been incredible for Oregon. They were at 29, I think, to start.
Like, we were talking about we had a mailbag. We were talking about why is Rutgers doing better than Oregon, and then we were like, it's fine. But even I didn't expect this onslaught of incredible recruits. Yeah.
So they are 5th nationally now. They were at 5th, I was going to say, after getting Brew. There's a couple other schools that landed guys and jumped them. They were at 7 going into the 4th of July. And obviously with Moore, they jumped back up to 5. They're in on some other studs, a bunch of other 5 stars, a bunch of other high-end 4 stars. I think it was Andrew Ivins from 24/7 had a story a couple of days ago of like the battle for number 1 in this class. And I don't think Oregon is necessarily like the favorite, or like maybe the most likely. Like, if you were giving odds here, they were kind of a dark horse more than anything, just because Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame are all ahead right now. And Ohio State and Bama in particular have created a pretty good sized gap here. But Oregon has 15 commits. They both have like 20, 22 commits. Maybe Oregon goes on another run here, gets a couple more 5 stars. We can get into some names later if we want, but like, I don't know if it's going to be the number 1 ranked class, but I'd probably be surprised if it's any lower than where they're at right now, just because on a per recruit basis, they have the 2nd best average behind Alabama. And Alabama has an average of 94.11, and Oregon has an average of 94.10. So from an average recruit perspective, Oregon is doing as well as just about anybody out there right now. And so they're at 5 right now. I don't know how big this class is going to be. I think there's a chance that they are a little on the smaller side from a landing class, because the last couple they went huge, went like plus 25. I don't know if they're going to go that far this cycle, but I think this is going to be a top 5 class when all said and done. And it's possible if they go on another hot streak here, they could be top 3 and maybe even pushing for that top spot. I don't want to sit here and predict them be the number 1 ranked recruiting class in the country, because Ohio State and Bama and Georgia are recruiting machines, but like Oregon is in the conversation, and that says a lot.
Yeah, I think like we've talked about the possibility of them landing the number 1 overall class specifically last year and the last 2 seasons, kind of, but last year specifically was as close as they were going to get, and they were still 25 points behind in the composite score, like behind Georgia with one fewer recruit. Like, it's going to be really difficult. And again, Ohio State has already built a 304-point class with 22 commits, which is pretty astounding. And so they're 40 points ahead of Oregon. But okay, sorry, like a number 3 class is pretty good.
Yes.
Oregon right now is 15 commits. Their composite score is 265.81. And that's with 15 guys. Last year with 27 kids, it was 293.20. And there's a really good chance that Oregon breaks that 293 mark, which is the program record. And I know it's like there's no limit on how many kids you can bring in, so it kind of makes the scores higher and blah blah blah, like compared to what it was a couple of years ago. But 293, 20 is still really damn good, and that's only 2 commits higher than the 25 threshold that, a lot of previous coaches had to deal with. And like you said, they're still in for a lot of 5 stars, like Pickett and Jonah Williams. Like Oregon is right in the mix with both of those guys, and so if you add those to the class, it becomes even better. And I don't think they're gonna get the number 1 spot. And maybe that's like the pessimistic or the realistic side of me. But again, there's no problem with the number 3 spot again. If they go back to back number 3 spots in the country for 2 straight years under Dan Lanning, like that's and we talked about the blue chip ratio like coming out was like a week or two ago, and Oregon is a top 5 if I'm remembering correctly.
They were they were 5th.
And again, you add another group where more than half or more than 3/4 basically of your entire class is 4 or 5 stars. Like that's pretty damn good. And again, they're still in for a lot of players. There's still signing day flips that could happen, like they did last season. Like you didn't necessarily know if they were going to get. They needed wide receivers last year on going into signing day, and then they landed 2 4-stars in McClellan and Pelham. So, and then they got Gatlin Bear, who again won't be on campus till 26, but that's still going to help in the recruiting rankings. So I think that they're somehow, it still doesn't seem reasonable, but they're in better shape this year than they were last year. And last year it was that we had like probably the same exact discussions. Like, oh, is there a way for them to get the number 1 class? It's like, maybe we're going through it, probably doing all the scores again. And this year they're in better shape. They have 2 5-stars. They had 1 composite 5-star last season. For a majority of the year. And then like that got bumped down when Mateo and Aiden Breland got knocked down to 4 stars. And then they got Bear on the later signing day. So they already have double the 5-stars or 3 5-stars this year by the composite or the top 247. So they're in a better shape this year somehow. It doesn't feel like doesn't feel real, but here they are. They're beating out all the blue bloods. They're right there with Georgia, Bama, Ohio State. Notre Dame's a good recruiting school. So, and again, with, take your pick. Oregon has fewer recruits than everybody in the top 10, except for LSU with 13. So it's a good time to be an Oregon Duck right now.
I just got crazy here and threw a couple names in the class calculator to see what happened.
Sure.
I just threw 3 5-stars that Oregon has, I think, a decent shot with, which you mentioned 2 of them, Jonah Williams, DJ Pickett. I also threw in Trey McNutt. If they get those 3 guys, and again, I'm not saying they will, but there's like kind of scuttle that there's a good chance. I know we had DJ Pickett, Tom Moy came on our website, and you should get a VIP subscription, but I'll share it. He says their Oregon's in a good shape there. He's announcing later this month. If they get those 3, they'd move to 297.47, which would put them at number 2 nationally and surpass last year's. Last year was like 293, I think you said.
293, yeah.
Yeah, so just those 3
and that's
recruits.
With 18 kids.
Yes. So that would be the path theoretically to get to number 1. Get those 3, add a couple of other kids. There's definitely still need at offensive line. Probably need for a couple more defensive backs. Maybe another. They don't really have a true linebacker at the moment. Nasir Wyatt is kind of listed as one, but he's more of like an edge guy in my mind. I'll be curious to see what happens with him positionally. But yeah, this class is crazy good, and it's trending in the direction where it could be the best ever in program history. And again, I think top 3 feels very attainable. Number 1 to me feels like kind of a reach, but you just don't know. And if they finish as strong as they could, like there's a possibility, and just having that conversation says a ton.
Yeah, I got no more. It's really just genuinely impressive what Dan has been able to do in the last couple of years as head coach.
I'm trying to think, were there any other things we wanted to hit on this one here? We've done the class, we've done the Dakorien Moore breakdown. Oh, here's something. What do you think about this as a nickname from Akili Smith Jr.? Dakorien.
Sure. I mean, I'm down. I'm still going to call him Dakorien Moore because that's his real name. Dakorien is a good one to have. I like that from Akili Jr.
Yeah, Akili coming up with a clever nickname there, and the only issue is that actually almost sounds too much like his name. Like you would like only be able to differentiate as like a tweet or something written. Because you could say Dakorien, like It sounds the same, but I wanted to give a shout out there. That was like one of the final silly things that I had from what's been a really fun 24 hours. I guess what's next in recruiting. We know DJ Pickett has an announcement set for, I think, July 16th or 17th.
I think it's the 17th.
I think you're right. Amarion Robinson, a safety out of Arkansas, is announcing on the 6th. That's tomorrow. Chris Lawson, a receiver, is announcing on the 7th. Don't think he's going to pick Oregon now because I'm pretty sure they would take Dakorien Moore over Chris Lawson, who is a really good, exciting young receiver. He reminds me of like Gary Bryant, but I think they're, and maybe we should just like, is there any need at receiver? Are they just done in your mind? Like I'm thinking they've got 4 guys. We've already talked about it. They've been just stacking incredible receiving recruiting classes the last couple of cycles with multiple 5 stars, with a bunch of other high-end 4 stars. Like, I kind of think they're done unless like whatever Michael Terry III is, who's another 5-star. He's listed as an athlete. He plays receiver, running back, and tight end in high school. Like, I think you take him and just you can figure something out with him. But I just think at this point, I think you're good. I don't know if there's a need to, unless you really want to solidify Junior Adams as like the #1 recruiting coach in the country. You're playing for that, but I think you're in pretty damn good shape.
Yeah, I think they're fine. Again, like if a 5-star kid wants to say, "Yeah, I'd like to come to Oregon," you're not going to say, "No, we already have 4 guys in the class," and I just don't think you're going to see the field. You're going to take him like every day of the week, but I think the 4 that they have is more than fine, more than suitable for the next level. And like you said, they've been stacking up this talent, and going into next year, if all these guys sign with Oregon, you'll have the development of McClellan and Pelham and Dylan Gresham, and there's another receiver whose name I'm forgetting that came in the class last year.
Jack Ressler.
Jack Ressler. Yep.
Can't forget him.
Punt return hero. There's like, that's a lot of depth. And again, we're not even counting like the Caspers, the Jurion Dickies, and their development as well. And maybe a transfer portal ad here or 2. But I think they're fine. But again, like if a 5-star wants to come down, you're not going to tell them no. I mean, that's just kind of pointing out the obvious. But and they're going to keep working the lines. I'm sure they are. It's not like not like Junior Adams is going to go on a 3-month vacation until the season starts. Like he's not going to just push it in, but he's gonna keep working the lines and trying to get kids. But I think this 4 right now is incredible. It's a great way to start the cycle. It's a great way to go into the season, and then you can show all these guys that either uncommitted or you have committed, like, hey, this is what Will Stein and I are going to do for you guys if you come here. So I think it's great. I think that they're probably done, and I think that's okay. But again, if somebody wants like a really high name profile guy is like, yeah, I'd like to come, then you bring him on. But then that's just a lot of talent, and that's more than okay.
I think that's all I had, Jared. I mean, this is very exciting. Oregon's class, I think a really good chance it's going to be the best in program history. Dakorien Moore, go watch his film, post some comments on it in the, write something in the YouTube comments if you want, post it on the DuckTerritory message board. Because I was like, this is a pretty outrageous stuff. And you have to be really excited. This is a really fun time from a recruiting perspective. Oregon has an incredibly talented team, and the blue chip ratio that Bud posted, I think Oregon had 80%. This class right now is 87% blue chip players. So it potentially, Oregon continues to be on the ascent as well, which is just kind of crazy to talk about in real time, to be honest with you, Jared.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is if you watch Moore's huddle tape, you'll realize the quarterback is quite good, which is very helpful for a player like Moore. And that's Keelan Russell, who's an Alabama commit, top 40 player in the country. Sometimes when you watch like high profile receivers tapes, it's like a bad quarterback, and you could see all like the natural athleticism of a receiver, but you can't really see him do a lot of things with like a ball well placed, or giving it to him on the run where he doesn't have to stutter step and do anything. And you're really, really able to see how good of a receiver Moore is because of his quarterback play. And you can easily kind of look at how he plays and then imagine him at the next level with a college quarterback because of how well Keelan Russell is playing at Duncanville. and it's fun. It makes it a lot easier to be like, all right, I can very clearly see why my Moore is this talented of a player, is because he gets the ball where it needs to be, and he just does the rest. And he's an absolute animal out there. So again, highly encourage those listening or those watching to go and watch Dakorien Moore's huddle tape, 7 minutes of your life that you'll be very happy that you watched. You won't be regretting it at all. So yeah, that's it. That's all I have. This is where we're going to end the podcast. So for Erik Skopil, I'm Jared Mack. Enjoy this holiday weekend-ish. Enjoy the nice weather, hopefully, wherever you're listening. And that'll do it for this episode of the Odds and Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.